Hello and welcome back to the second episode of the Survival Horror Guide, a series where we play and then analyze survival horror games. We rate them on their fear factor and then give them an overall score. Finally, we send it over to the series' totally arbitrary rating system to see how it stacks up against the rest of the survival horror competition. Today, we are taking a look at the recently released, somewhat divisive Resident Evil 3 Remake. I say divisive because the response to this game when it first came out was fairly split, especially amongst the Resident Evil community. It drew complaints over cut content, a short campaign, and one single campaign at that, coming hot off the heels of Resident Evil 2, which had two separate scenarios, which was admittedly a more ambitious title and it had more meat on its bones, more to offer. What I find kind of ironic is that a lot of this conversation are literally echoes from the past. Very similar complaints surrounded the original Resident Evil 3 20 years ago, and similar comparisons were drawn to the original Resident Evil 2. It's almost fitting in a way. And just like 20 years ago, despite having some shortcomings, Resident Evil 3 is still very much worth your time. Now this game is of course a remake, or so they call it. The lines here are a little bit blurred. If you look at the remakes made by like Bluepoint, for instance, Shadow of the Colossus, now that was a straight up remake. They remade that game. Or look at like the Crash Bandicoot trilogy. Those games are all faithfully recreations. They are all beat for beat. They're the same game. But if you look at Resident Evil 3 and 2 for that matter, these games are more of a re-envisioning of the originals. They play nothing like their PS1 counterparts. They have different level layouts, different progression, puzzles, everything. They're different games. So to address the quote-unquote cut content right out of the gate here, I'm a little bit more forgiving, I think, than some people just because of that. Sure, some areas from the originals didn't make it into this game, but then again, some new things were added. I will say, however, the biggest omission, which was the clock tower from the original game, it's not an area that you can explore in this one. Now what's funny is that in the original, the clock tower was honestly my least favorite area in the entire game. But the idea of it was really cool, which makes it so ripe for them to re-explore and build upon and make it awesome. But sadly, that wasn't the case. I will admit, that was a missed opportunity. I'd much rather have a re-envisioned clock tower than like the sewer area, for instance, which was a new area in this game and was most likely included so they could reuse some assets from Resident Evil 2. But I digress. Let's not focus on what's not in the game, and let's talk about what is. The game stars fan favorite badass Jill Valentine, the year 1998, the place Raccoon City, which has fallen into peril from a zombie outbreak as a result of resident shady pharmaceutical company Umbrella, whose totally illegal bioorganic weapons research produced the T-virus, which ended up infecting nearly the entire city. Though if word got out that Umbrella was behind the incident, they'd be ruined, and they'd stop at nothing to silence those who would expose them. And this is where the big bad nemesis comes into play. Deployed by Umbrella, he's specifically targeting members of STARS, the surviving members of the original Resident Evil game. You see, what separates Nemesis from the rest is that he can be controlled, programmed with an objective. He can use weapons, he can manipulate his body to adapt on the fly. He's terrifying, and in my opinion, he's the coolest, most badass villain this series has ever produced. And of course, they brought him back in this game, they modernized him extremely well, and just like in the original, he stalks you and follows you, chases you through certain sections of the game. What's funny is, upon subsequent playthroughs, you do learn his patterns. His spawns are actually scripted, so it's a little bit different than the way Mr. X behaved in Resident Evil 2, which is a bit more random. And of course, being a video game, you'll quickly learn of certain areas where Nems just won't follow, like the toy store, for instance. I find it hilarious that he'll be right on your ass, but when you enter the toy store, he just won't go inside, but he'll like stand right outside the window just peering in. The first time I saw it, I was actually a little creeped out. And this game definitely has a larger focus on action compared to Resident Evil 2. Both Jill and Carlos are faced with far more threats, more zombies, than what Leon and Claire faced in the previous game. But that being said, Jill's a badass member of STARS, so she's got like this extra dodge mechanic that they added to this game. It allows you to evade attacks, and if you time it perfectly, you'll get a perfect dodge, which slows down time and gives you a chance to actually counterattack. This is super important during boss fights, especially on the higher difficulties. It just adds a little extra layer of depth to some otherwise fairly straightforward combat. Even the original Resident Evil 3 had a larger focus on combat. In a weird way, I feel like this game is closer in line with the Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6 games than it is to the classic Resident Evil games. It's quite a bit more linear. While you are able to explore, this game doesn't have like the equivalent of the mansion from the first game or the RPD from the second game, a place where you really spend a lot of time solving puzzles and unlocking new areas. Instead, this game has kind of like smaller, truncated areas that you'll explore for a little while, but then move on from. Like you're in a small city block for a little while, then you'll move on to the sewers where you'll spend a little bit of time there, the hospital, and you don't return back to any of these areas. It really is more linear and more akin to something like Resident Evil 4, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. RE3 is definitely designed to be played through multiple times, which I absolutely did. In total, I've probably done like 7 to 8 runs through this game. I've beaten it on Hardcore, Nightmare, I've even beat it on Inferno difficulty, which I actually have a 4K playthrough up on the Let's Play YouTube channel if you guys want to check it out. I will say, having the game be a bit more linear doesn't make it quite as fun in subsequent playthroughs. No need to really optimize your pathing and puzzle solving in this game, as it's so straightforward. But the game does give you a bevy of cool unlocks, cool weapons, unlimited ammo weapons, and even bonus costumes. You unlock these by spending points, and you earn points by beating the game or accomplishing certain challenges while playing the game. I thought they were pretty cool. One thing I thought they absolutely nailed in this game were the characters. Like, Jill has seen a lot of reinventions. There's been so many versions of Jill. Almost all of them have been great, but this might just be my favorite version of Jill yet. As I said many times, she is a total badass in this game, and she has so much sass. She's constantly talking shit.
It's my turn, bitch!
She talks shit to Nemesis while fighting him. It's awesome. And then there's Carlos, who in the original didn't really have much of any personality at all, but now he's become like an instant favorite, super endearing. I really hope we see more of this character. I don't want to be left in a cold, cruel, Carlosless world.
It's alright, you're going ahead. I'm not gonna die on you, leave you in a cold, cruel, Carlosless world.
Okay.
Also, visually, this game is incredible. One of the best looking horror games ever made. The one thing I did notice is this game is missing some of the dismemberment physics from Resident Evil 2. In that game, you could blow off limbs and zombies would still be crawling or whatever, but they got rid of that in this game, and I wonder if it has to do with limitations of the hardware, as there's generally more zombies and more happening on screen at once in this game. One sequence in particular has Carlos fighting off a horde for several minutes, and the zombies, they just disintegrate when you kill them, like it's Resident Evil 4 or something. That whole sequence in general felt a little odd, and was probably the low point in the game for me. Another couple of nitpicks I have: I wish we got to explore more of the streets of Raccoon City. I was really excited to explore the dilapidated, zombie-infested streets of Raccoon City, but when you boil it down, there's really just a couple small sections, like a couple small city blocks is all we got, which is a damn shame. I wish there was more first form Nemesis. The regular human bipedal form of Nemesis is the best Nemesis, period. Even though we don't go inside the clock tower, there is still the fight under the clock tower, at which point in the game, Nemesis transforms into this running on all fours beast-type monster that just doesn't have the same charm, doesn't have the same appeal as humanoid Nemesis. Now let's finish this off with something that I really loved. If you're a fan of Resident Evil, if you're a fan of Capcom, there's so much to nerd over in this game. There's so many moments and areas that pay homage to the original. You start off in Jill's apartment, and I enjoy just looking around and seeing all the attention to detail that they put into everything. It was awesome. Around town there's posters and Easter eggs to other Capcom games. Morgan from Darkstalkers is on the sign that Brad throws. The car that Jill gets into to run over Nemesis was the same car that Ethan drives in Resident Evil 7. And goddamn, returning to the RPD as Carlos and seeing Marvin. There's just so much to nerd over here, so much fan service. If you're a fan of the series, you gotta play it. If my biggest complaint about the game is that I wish there was more of it, it could be a lot worse. On the fear factor scale, this game is a 6.5. While it's not super scary per se, there's a lot of tension and not knowing what's around the next corner. Even regular zombies pose a major threat and can deal serious damage. And it gets even more intense when Nemesis is on your ass. This game will definitely make some people scream. Overall, this game is an 8.5 out of 10. Great characters, fun to play, absolutely beautiful, and Nemesis was awesome for the most part. Though by no means is it perfect, and I do wish that it was longer. Sliding over to the series' totally arbitrary rating system, this game takes over the top spot, and now we have 2 games on the board. Dead Space 3 gets bumped to second place. I'm very excited to see, once we get more games done, how this list is going to shape up. I'm sure it's going to piss a lot of people off. Good. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of the Survival Horror Guide. As always, let me know what you thought about it, and let me know what you thought of Resident Evil 3, and if the scores I gave it are deserving or not. Please hit that like button if you enjoyed it. Thanks guys so much for watching this episode. Peace.